Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. Guys, I've got with me today Joe Morabito, who is President and CEO at Paragon Global Resources. Joe, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I'm not in any hurricane, so I'm okay.
That's right. That's right. A lot of us, we Floridians had to escape that sort of thing, but it sounds like you geographically are not in a place where you'd be at risk. So good for you, man. So we're going to be talking about a subject that I know a lot of you listening have been, doing a lot of reading about, a lot of research into, and are super interested in, and that is the importance of branding in B2B. But before we jump into all of that, Joe, I would love it if you would just give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the folks at Paragon have been up to these days.
Well, I've worked in business for 40 years, and I've worked all over the United States. The first 20 years, I did management consulting with some of the largest firms in the world. And then I actually had to start running my company, which I'm not sure which was more fun. But literally, I've worked all over the United States. I've worked outside the country, both in Asia and in Europe. And so I can say that I've touched, I think, all aspects of running a small or mid-sized business. And also, since I've worked for very large companies, working in corporate America, relative to the dynamics that goes with working for a top 100 company. So I speak big corporate and I speak small and mid-sized business pretty comfortably when I need to. Paragon Global Resources is the holding company that actually owns 4 companies. Paragon Relocation Resources, which is focused on corporate relocation. Paragon Home Resources, which is our retail moving services. We deal with first-time buyers, right-sized buyers, empty nesters, seniors moving to retire, and seniors moving into assisted living. Paragon Financial Resources is our business process outsourcing company, because we do have an India connection, and also then Paragon Real Estate Resources, which we're just now rebranding to do REITs specific to senior communities. So we've got a lot of different things going on, a lot of different revenue streams, but obviously branding is critical to all of them.
Yeah, you've got a lot of different experiences to sort of pull from, and that's what we were talking about offline. Is that this idea of the importance of B2B branding can be pretty broad, because sometimes that means you're talking about employer branding, right, in a client or prospect facing way. And then other times it could mean you're talking about recruitment marketing, right, and how the organization comes off to prospective employees, or you're talking about branding at the personal level, the individual level, for executives or for those individual contributors who work on a team. So there is a lot to sort of keep straight. So what I'd like to have you do first is just give us a little overview of what exactly you focus on when you think about employer branding. When you think about branding in B2B, and where you learned some of these things, where it first became sort of clear to you the importance of these things.
Well, I could just relate a very funny story. When I worked at Merrill Lynch as a very young manager, I was doing these big proposals, and I decided that we needed some kind of stationery to actually do these proposals on. And so I took the Merrill Lynch Bull. Everybody's familiar with the Merrill Lynch bull,
Mhm.
and I put it over in the right-hand corner of the page on the bottom. And then I had like a square that was, the piece of the paper that the text actually went into. And I was using that paper for about a year. And one day I got a call from the Merrill Lynch Bull Police in New York City. And they said to me, "You're using the bull." I said, "Yes." Well, first I said, "What do you mean?" Because I played a little bit dumb. They said, "Look, we know you're using the bull in an unauthorized way." And I said, "Well, I didn't change the bull. I mean, it's the bull." And they said, "No, no, no, no. You don't seem to understand the brand equity we have in the bull. And whenever the bull is used, it has to be used as part of our Merrill Lynch logo. It is never pulled off that logo. It is always part of that logo." And they said to me, and remember, I was a young manager of about, 29 years old. They said to me, "You will either cease and desist from using the bull in an unauthorized way, or you will be fired." Well, that was my first lesson about branding. And what I came to realize eventually when we founded Paragon, and our logo is a double diamond logo, and that happened almost by accident with me just squiggling on a yellow pad, because in those days we didn't have a lot of money to pay marketers, and get fancy dancy consulting. So I designed our logo. It's a double diamond logo. And that double diamond logo is in front of every one of the Paragon companies that we own. And we simply never mess with the brand we've created, because we have a tremendous amount of brand equity. We've spent millions and millions of dollars over the years in promoting that brand and creating the visibility in each marketplace that we need with that brand. And fortunately, we've never had to file bankruptcy or anything crazy where, sometimes when you have turmoil, you come out of it and you decide you're going to redo your brand because, maybe that brand equity just wasn't there anymore. Well, we've never experienced that. And so whenever I see anybody within our company who tries to get creative with our brand, I give them the story that I got when I was at Merrill Lynch. And I say, "No, you will not use the double diamonds separately. You will not, certain things in terms of what we will allow, including our colors, which are blue and silver. And so there's just things we don't change." And I will tell you, when I first founded the company, the most important thing was the brand and getting the brand out there before we had clients, before we had revenue, before we had anything. I focused in those days. Today it's all internet, of course, and the web and all that. But I focused on those corporate brochures, and I focused on marketing materials, because I knew that if we didn't look like we were much bigger than what we were, and remember, we were signing big Fortune 500 companies and doing business with them, we had to look bigger than we were at that point. And I knew that it was very important from a professional standpoint that everything we were doing related to creating that brand was going to be absolutely critical to the success of the company. So before I spent money on virtually anything and everything, the money went into the brand creation. Because I knew no matter how good our services might have been at the time, and even today, if we couldn't sell the brand, we weren't going to be able to generate revenue. We weren't going to grow. We weren't going to be a growing concern. And so I was very focused in the beginning on what that brand was going to look like and what image we were going to portray. Today, we have the slogan, assisting with life decisions, because if you think about all the services that we provide, that's exactly what we do. And so that slogan, assisting with life decisions, runs across all four of our businesses, all four of our brands that, again, are under the Paragon logo, but with the differentiator, whether it's Paragon Relocation Resources,
Sure.
Paragon Home Resources, Paragon Financial Resources, or Paragon Real Estate Resources. But the brand identity is very clear.
That's so interesting. My experience is mostly in startups and, selling like a B2B SaaS solution. And I haven't seen, at least not in a way that it was clear to me, right? Folks take that approach that you just talked about, where they start with brand and prioritize that. What I've seen more often than not and maybe it's because, like you mentioned, the technology that's out there now, but what I've seen more often than not is there's a star made of whomever the founder is of this startup. And all the emphasis is on the idea that this person had and how cool the technology is that they're using, or how cool they're using the technology. And at most, when we think about branding for those organizations, it comes down to, like I said, you're kind of limited to whatever personal brand that founder or that prominent executive associated with that company has. And then the efforts to have a discernible brand outside of that can kind of become an afterthought, because they are thinking about, scaling in terms of their sales organization, or getting as many clients and acquiring as many clients as possible in the beginning. And so for you guys to say, hey, look, we're confident that that's going to come, so much so that we're just going to figure out how to get, eyes and ears on us in a way that's meaningful. That's powerful. That's powerful.
Well, I knew, to be honest, as the founder of the company, and as someone who's done management consulting, where I really was selling myself and presumably the expertise that I had, I knew that I couldn't grow beyond just me if I didn't create a transactional business that had nothing to do with me. Now, obviously, I've been around for 28 years, and I'm integral to the management of the company, but I knew that there's only so many hours. If you're a management consultant, there's only so many hours in a year you could sell. And you could never have achieved the kind of sustainability and success that we've achieved unless we created a brand that was way beyond anything I could do personally. And so I was very, very cognizant, having done consulting at that point for many years, I knew that, if we were going to become a corporate relocation company, we had to have the ability to move thousands of people all over the world for major companies. Well, I wasn't going to be doing those myself. Obviously, we have relocation consultants who work with our customers. So I knew that we had to create a sustainable brand that was going to appeal to very large companies, even though at the time we were a very small company. And so we did that successfully. And, even now, as I look at our Paragon Home Resources brand, and that company is about 3 years old. We just redid our website. Now, of course, it's all internet-based, although we do have some printed materials. But, we did our website so that we're targeted at the 5 market segments that are the services that we deliver under that brand. And if you looked at it, if anybody went to ParagonHomeResources.com, you would see that it's very, very brand specific relative to the 5 market segments that we're focused on, first-time buyers, right-sized buyers, empty nesters, seniors moving to retire, usually from cold to warm places, and then also the seniors moving into assisted living. So it's not nebulous. It's very specific from a branding perspective to the customer that I believe we're going to be working with, and we are working with, under that particular brand. So, I can't emphasize enough, particularly for startups, particularly for smaller companies, how important it is to figure out, who you are, and to make sure that your brand demonstrates it clearly, whatever it is. If
That's
you're
so
Joe the Pizza Man, it doesn't matter. It has to be very clear as to what you're selling.
Right. And knowing who you are, obviously that's applicable in like all of life. But when you and I were starting to talk about, individuals developing their personal brand. And so I'm going to make a confession here. I was on Instagram, and there's an advertisement for this free ebook on how to, quickly gain a following or become an influencer. I was doing an Instagram thing, and I was starting an Instagram account from scratch. And a piece of advice in this ebook was like, you have to sort of cultivate some personality that is like you adjacent, that, I don't know, like everybody wants to be your best friend, blah, 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 blah. And I felt like that was really bad advice. And that's so I stopped reading this ebook altogether. But I was like, look, it has to be about who I actually am. And I think when you look at, in terms of branding, when you look on LinkedIn, like as an example, who's winning that competition or whatever the brand wars happen to be between individuals, a lot of them consultants, like you mentioned, if those folks that come across as the most clear to themselves on who they are.
Well, today especially, it's interesting. My son, Michael, is in charge of sales for us, and he is an expert at using social media. In fact, he's in the top 1% of LinkedIn users in the United States, maybe even in the world. And so he has used social media in ways, when you talk about personal branding, he's really good at this. In fact, one of our former employees was in a training session at the new company she was working for, and it was about sales and account management. And they actually, this is one of my competitors, referenced my son Mike because he's so visible on the internet in terms of social media and LinkedIn and all the other crazy things that people. Now, I'm an old guy. That's way beyond me. But this is where people, young people, particularly in sales, and I do say to my salespeople, you need to brand yourself, because before the client buys us, they have to buy you. And if they don't buy you, they're not buying us. And so I say to salespeople, one of the reasons successful salespeople, the 20% who sell 80% of everything, are successful is because they've done a great job branding themselves today. And in some ways, it's much easier than it was, when I was selling a million years ago, because social media didn't exist when I started at Merrill Lynch and I was a young sales guy or I was in consulting. My branding all happened when I went to conferences and networking, and I always did all of that. But now, because of social media, you can extend your reach exponentially. And by the way, I would make this suggestion, and I always on my radio show, I talk about Joe the Pizza Man. I don't care what the business is. The branding element is absolutely critical, both from a company standpoint and from a personal standpoint. And to the extent that you yourself, no matter who you work for, are a brand in and of yourself, you got to make that happen. And those, by the way, are the most successful salespeople. And keep in mind that if that person goes from one company to another, their brand goes with them.
Right.
So even though they may have worked for ABC company, now that they work for DEF company, fine, they work for another company, but the brand that they created automatically transfers to the new company.
And I think that's one of the things that's difficult when you are, an individual contributor at an organization that maybe they understand the importance of branding for them as an organization, but in terms of how you spend your time in a given workday, there isn't always the freedom to spend your time in a given workday building your brand, because so many folks, when it comes to salespeople, are putting this pressure on them as far as, well, did you get leads from it? Did you book any meetings from it? What's the ROI? And it's like they don't understand the relationship building aspect of it in and of itself, the awareness and brand in itself.
I see the end result, and to the extent that the salespeople in our company that are most successful are those that have created their own personal brands, and so some part of their day is just it's like, look, I've always said in my mind that good salespeople are born; they're not made. Now you can enhance sales skills, but I think there's a genetic element that is either there or it's not there, and this social media aspect of it is just part of the business day. You don't even think about it. It's the way you use your brand to contact other people, to shortcut the sales process, presumably. And ironically, what I see anyways, is people will respond to a LinkedIn connection more often than they will if you just send them an email.
I'm testing that out myself right now.
Yeah. So that's what I'm finding. And, it's beyond me at this stage of my life, but certainly in terms of our young people that are involved in sales and account management, it's very, very powerful. And I really encourage them to do it. It's part of their job. I don't see it as a detraction. I see it as an integral part of what their daily responsibilities are.
I agree.
I would never question it, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think what happens is, besides the time constraint, and I know when I first started this personal branding journey on LinkedIn, there was a lot of just confusion and just a lack of resources in terms of understanding what content I should be putting out, right? So if on the one hand, I want to be engaging folks who might be prospects or who I want to build relationships with in terms of the role that I'm currently in, and then on the other hand, I want a brand that's going to transcend the role that I'm in. So how do you how do you navigate or negotiate that ratio between how much of your personal brand has to do with you and who you are and what should transcend the role, and what has to do with the role and you advancing there?
Well, you're always representing the company that you work for, and you're always creating some connectivity in what you're doing in social media to the company that you work for, because that's your whole point of attempting to network and connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just an integral part of what a good salesperson does every day. I just don't see it as disconnected at all.
Yeah.
I see it as totally integrated with creating both the personal brand while you're advancing the company's brand. I mean, to me, it's integral. But again, if you were to go to another company, a competitor, let's say, you still have created that personal brand equity. And to the extent that you use it for another company, you certainly can do that. And I don't see it from a personal standpoint as time wasted at all, because you're always going to have that personal connectivity in the marketplace.
I agree. I'll be specific though, right? So I worked for a startup that sold into the construction industry, sold a tool to subcontractors to make sure that they were getting paid more quickly or paid according to their terms. And a lot of the marketing collateral that those sales folks, or that we as sales folks, were being provided and encouraged to share on our social channels, was so specific that even if you were taking a good chunk of your day to be on LinkedIn and engage with folks, especially if you're engaging with folks who might be prospects, once you are not in that role anymore and someone else from in your new role or new industry maybe comes to your page and sees that all the rest of that content, they're going to be, I was confused as to why they wouldn't be confused. Like, okay, so this person was talking about construction stuff here with, their company's
right.
white papers, and now they're giving me, tips on how to stay motivated on a Monday. So where is that individual in all of this content is really where I was going with that.
I guess I just assumed that a successful salesperson would go from one company to another that's a competitor selling the same products and services. Yeah. Now, obviously, if you leave an industry and you go to a completely different industry, now your contacts are completely different because you're selling a different product. So you're kind of starting over when you're in that environment. But ideally, if you were going to another company in the same industry, then for sure you're contacting the same people. You're just now representing a different company.
Right.
So that you would lose some of that brand equity if you left the industry. No doubt, you'd have to start over.
That's right. Which for me means that I've just had to lean more heavily on things that are evergreen. Right. If I want to talk about, I do talk more about like things that have to do with, staying motivated, whether you're an individual contributor or a leader, and just identifying things that anybody in any business is going to want, value from, or going to, be having these same kinds of discussions. So picking content that transcends industry has really been what's been working for me. And not to mention the fact that I sell to sellers and I sell to marketers, so it's easier to parallel path it that way. But I can talk about this with you all day long. I do want to make sure that I give our listeners a shot at getting to know you just a little bit better. So, Joe, now that I've successfully picked your brain and seen what I could get out of it, it's time for you to tell us about what you're putting in it. So talk about a learning resource or something that you've just engaged with out in life that is either informing your approach or that's just got you excited these days.
Well, what I'm most excited about today, and one of the reasons why I guess I'll probably never retire, is, we market and sell our services through a variety of sales channels that ultimately give us visibility in the marketplace. So, other than the old way, which would have been national advertising, which isn't very cost effective, we have other ways to get to the customer. But what I'm focused on today is not only getting the customer from those sales channels, but actually selling other services to those sales channels. Because the way I look at it, when you establish a business relationship, and it's true in any industry, the question is, how do you maximize that business relationship? Because you spend a lot of time and money and resources getting that business relationship, that partnership, and then how do you maximize that partnership? So, for example, we get leads from senior care communities, that these are people who need to sell their homes in order to move into assisted living. Well, we're creating products and services now to sell to those same senior communities. We can do business process outsourcing for them. We're developing an elder care assistance program that they can buy and offer to their customers. And so I'm now looking for, other ways to maximize our talent, frankly, and the pieces of the puzzle that we bring to the table. And every day is a learning experience for me with every meeting that I have with one of our partners, because I'm a very good listener, having been in consulting for 20 years. I listen very carefully, and I listen for needs in the marketplace. And when I see a need that we can fill through one of our businesses, I'm all over it. And so I'm actually focused on the new stuff, because the old stuff is kind of old stuff. It's not that much fun for me anyway. But the new stuff is fun. And then, of course, I have my radio show, CEO Business Mind, which anybody can. We're syndicated. We're in markets across the country. And you can catch that on podcast as well at americamattersmedia.us. All the shows are there from the last 3 years. You can go to ceobusinessmind.com and put in your email address and follow the confirmation instructions. And if you do that, you can check out my blog postings going back years. You can see some of the businesses that we're in. You can even see some of the job openings that we have somewhere in the United States, sometimes even outside.
I love it. Listen, thanks so much for laying that out for us. Other than what you've pointed us to already, as far as, your radio show and your podcast, if folks want to connect with you individually, how can they go about doing that?
Well, you can always, I'm on email 724 at jmorabito@paragongri.com. And anybody that wants to connect to me can certainly get me by email. The most efficient way to get my eyes on what you're trying to tell me.
There you have it, folks. Reach out. He's a smart man, lots of experience. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Joe. With all your experience, I bet you could fill a few episodes, so we'll have to have you on again. But this has been great. Thank you so much.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.